Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Rich Relationship Podcast, episode number 9. Relationship roles, decision making, and responsibilities. Stay in your lane. Man, these titles that you be coming up with, I was thinking about that. I was like, well, when you originally said stay in your lane, I was like, what stay in your lane? Does it sound like a conflict about
Are we a car?
Does it sound like a conflict about to happen or
it's like
argument?
It's a parking lot.
Well, why did you pick stay in your lane?
Because I think it's important for us to understand that everyone has things that they're good at, and you need to find out what that is and stay in your lane.
And we're going to be talking about that next on this episode, Rich Relationship Podcast. Let's go to the show.
Okie doke.
So we talking about staying in your lane. And when you came up with this title, the first thing I thought about after we kind of dialogued and talked about what the kind of overall topic was going to be on, was talking about staying in your lane as far as when you have to make decisions in relationships and roles. Now where you used to be an individual and now you have come together as two people.
The two shall be one.
The two shall be one. Now,
and how do you do that?
Yeah, and before we go into some of the details, I got to tell a story about how this we had this epiphany. You're laughing. I'm going to turn you down. So
Don't turn me down. Don't turn me down.
All right. Well, and I thought about, we started our very first salon that you opened, or I should say we opened, was in Texas, and we had got through.
But that wasn't the first. The first one was in Germany.
Okay, Germany. But when we got to Texas and we were living in San Antonio, this is a time we decided to go all into your actual brick and mortar building, your own thing out of the house and everything. And we found a place. We secured the place. We already
and
had.
It actually was in Louisiana, babe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Louisiana, but this is this. Oh yeah, it was Louisiana.
My
bad. Yeah, my bad. It was Louisiana. My correction. So we found a place, secured it. It was nothing but God how we got the building. That's a whole nother story. Yeah. But anyway, so this is the first time we actually had to do the renovations and everything, and we kind of handy. So we were doing all this stuff all ourselves. You're really good at the decorating and stuff. So we were doing it, and I remember we were at each other in conflict constantly about every little decision that had to be made about color scheme, even the name of the building, or even though it was your building or in your business, and we do everything together.
Right. We do.
So we're partnered into everything. So I thought I had a say in what the name of the shop is going to be. Even though I wasn't going to be, I was the maintenance guy, the handyman guy, sometimes your shampoo assistant. Yeah.
Yes.
So I was
our
kind
accountant, our angel investor.
So actually doing all those things, but we were in conflict or having problems with just getting this place open. Everything from where the bowls are going to go to the color. But the one that stood out was the paint.
Yes.
We had decided. Renee is the design type. She has very giftings in those things. She does all the graphics for everything that we do, which is great. So she's the artistic one. So when I remember talking, I said, what's the colors going to be? And you said green, camel brown, and blue. Y'all, I looked at that. I could not see this. And so guess what? We started arguing about it. And I was like, oh no, that ain't going to work. Now, I'm not artistic. I have no design skills.
He's the analytical one.
I have no design skills and all that, but I was just so adamant about this, and I was like, I'm not seeing this. And we had a heated discussion,
yes, very
a conflict about it, and I finally acquiesced and said, whatever, kind of like just gave in and said, okay, this is where you're going to be working, but I just don't see it.
But it just felt like it was just
tension.
It felt like it was so much tension through the whole process, and from that, we made a decision. It's like, okay, this is not working. We have got to come up with because of the way our personalities are, we both normally just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. But this is the part of the story, though, and I'll get to it, was you told me the design that you wanted for the walls. Mm-hmm. You said, I see a checkerboard pattern on these walls, and this is, if you visualizing this is about a 10 by 14 room, squared off, perfectly square, just a typical room salon, and so, but nothing's in it. It's a totally empty wall, empty room. We hadn't even put the mirrors or anything else up, but you said, I see a checkerboard pattern, and I was like, okay. And maybe I didn't get to it fast enough. And I remember you just decided you were going to do this on your own.
Yeah.
So because I was still working a full-time job, so I went to work. So Miss Renee decided she's going to go, and I see it in my head.
I'm not the measurement type person.
I just see it in my head. I'm going to get it done. And I remember walking in, and I seen paint everywhere, y'all. I mean, it was on her, on the walls, on the floor. I'm like, what are you doing? And so you told me, and you were frustrated with the whole process, and that stuff didn't bother me. So I said, okay, we finally took a breath, and we said, you know what, we got to figure something out. And this is not a long drawn out process. It's not like we sit down and went through a counseling session about it, but we just started talking about it. I said, okay. And I remember saying, what do you see? And you just kind of explain what you've seen in your mind. Right. And I said, okay, I got it.
And he got a measure and tape out and a ruler. And
I said, I got it, y'all. And I just grabbed, the blue painter's tape that you do for corners and edging and all that stuff. I measured off the walls. And so I measured off the walls, squared it up, did some quick calculations. And I said, okay, they need to be this size, this size, this size. And I started taping. Yes. And just like she had something in her mind, I seen this in my mind. And y'all just imagine a checkerboard pattern of blue tape all over this wall. Mm-hmm. So Renee left. I remember she had to go run some errands or something. You left. And so I had my system already in my mind. So I grabbed my 3 cans of paint and 3 individual paint pans. And I just started blue, green, brown. Alternate. Blue, green, brown. And I just patterned it out. And I remember you walking in and you just seen splotches of paint all over the wall and seeing the tape. And you were just like, oh, no. No. And as she's in the middle of no, I just start pulling off tape. And you just see this checkerboard pattern emerge like y'all, I was like Picasso. It was awesome. And we even got pictures of that, you know. But anyway, so that was something that we learned, but the reason why we tell that story is because that was
just like he was adamant about the colors that I wanted were not going to work. I was adamant that his system wasn't going to work.
Right. And so we had started something, and this is something that we do to this very day, is we recognize you have strengths.
And I have weaknesses.
And vice versa. So just like Renee has this design capability and I have this analytical, logical way of thinking, we took those two and combined them and merged them together to create this beautiful looking salon. And we did the same thing throughout. And that was, I remember us having that conversation. It was basically coming out to stay in your lane. So that's where the topic came from. The topic title of this show is staying in your lane, because when you're in your relationship with your partner, your spouse, your wife, your husband,
your cousin, your auntie,
anybody that you are in a relationship with, you have to put some thought to it to say, what are my strengths? What am I good at? What am I doing? And then also the other person has to give you that capability to be allowed, to allow you to do those things that your strength and you're gifted in, so everybody can benefit. So we tell that story because that stay in your lane is one of our mantras that we still adopt to this day. So, and it's easier for us to identify it now, where situations come up and circumstances come up and we basically say, you know what?
That's not my lane.
That's not my lane, and vice versa.
And even when we were doing this show, well, now this is many years later, we realized, as far as coming up with the equipment, I don't know, and Gil just got some new equipment, y'all. New equipment in the house or in the closet. He just got some new equipment. I don't know anything about any of these things that he uses, because that's not my lane.
Right.
That's not my area.
And when you sit down and do the editing, and when you sit down and do the graphics, the thumbnails that everyone sees when they go to the pages or when you go to download the show, and which we are thankful for that everybody has been doing and listening to. We appreciate that. That's your lane.
Yeah.
So.
And together, and so I was looking, we're getting prepared for this, and this is a part of what we do when we work with couples. This is an area that we deal with them on, helping them to understand roles and responsibilities. And this is not necessarily gender specific.
No.
It's really about you and your spouse sitting down, or just not necessarily sitting down, but just over time identifying, hey, you're good at this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm not good at this.
Right.
And really saying, well, since you're good at this, because I'll use an example. When we first got married, I'm a numbers person. I like managing money. I like taking $5 and making it $500. That's just the way I'm wired. And so that was a role that I took on.
You mean making the money stretch? Because if
Yes.
you could take 5 into 500,
yeah, I was really good.
I would be giving you about 50
I'm still good at
$5
that.
bills.
Making money stretch. And so a part of it is that where for us, we grew up in church and we were Christians, and they always said that the man should take care of the money. Well, what if the man isn't good at taking care of the money?
Mm-hmm.
Or what if the woman isn't good at cooking?
Right.
What if the woman likes cutting the grass? And so a part of what this is it's going to look different in every home,
in every
family,
relationship, yep.
in every relationship. And so you can't allow outside forces to dictate your roles and responsibilities. That's going to be something that you two are going to have to do as individuals, and really think about what makes our relationship work.
And because one of the things that you have to always remember, that at the simplest, most basic level, men and women are different.
Yes, we are.
I know that sounds like everybody's like, oh, I know that.
Yeah.
But when you really, really take time to think about that and the differences that we have, and not just even how we carry about and go about doing things,
even physically, men are physically stronger than women. I mean,
mm-hmm.
there's some things physically that you can do that I can't do. So while it's not gender specific, you still have to not ignore the obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like you have to understand that while men and women are different, there are some things that we have in common, and there's some things that we both like to do, certain things that we both don't like to do. I think about something as simple. Think about how long we were married before I realized that you didn't like putting away groceries.
It took you a little while. That's a whole nother story,
yeah.
Because we'd go to the grocery store.
And he would just disappear.
I would bring the groceries in. I would put them on the counter, and then I was out.
Yeah.
But that was uncommunicated, and that was something that I never even talked about, and I didn't even assume you maybe didn't notice it. It was just something that was my role. Go get the groceries, load them in the car, take them out, put them on the shelf, put them on the counter. And my part was done.
And it was never an issue, because some roles and responsibilities are just naturally, they just occur. And then others, you do have to be more, let's talk about like when you get married and you have children. Are you going to spank? Are you going to do time out? There are certain things you have to be willing to seriously talk about. Because if you don't talk about it, if you find that there's conflict with it, those are the areas you have to talk about. Because like for us, some of ours were never really defined. It just kind of naturally happened.
They work themselves out, but when you go back and play the Monday morning quarterback, or look back at how did we get to where we got to in this stage in our relationship, talking about, just like you just used the example of disciplining the children. Most people would say the father is the disciplinarian. Well, what happens if the dad is
deployed?
Well, especially in the military, where I would be deployed a lot. What you going to do? Save up all the punishments until he gets home, and the first thing he gets home, I haven't been around for a while. Now all of a sudden, the only thing I'm doing is issuing out discipline. That's how the kids are going to see him, as you only pop in, or the only type of relationship I have with you is discipline, where the same token is I have to allow you to sometimes carry that weight or that burden of doing those things. It's not my assignment. It's not your assignment. It's the thing
that responsibility.
That has to be dealt with, that we're talking about on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast. We're talking about decisions, roles, and responsibilities, and we titled this show "Staying in Your Lane." So as you're talking about that, it's important that you take time to communicate and talk about it. You cannot talk about it enough, as far as break it all the way down to, like Renee just talked about in the very beginning, of money.
Right.
Who's going to handle the finances?
Right.
As far as on a daily basis.
Stay home?
And sometimes your situation may make you make certain decisions about, well, maybe we both have to work, or maybe it's cheaper. Like in our situation, there was a time where You stayed at home for a few years because it was cheaper
than daycare.
Because it was just so costly. You were just working just to pay for daycare, and we weren't getting ahead. So it was, we sat down and like, looked at the numbers, looked at the situation, and said, you know what? Yeah, maybe it's time. And now in today's,
if you would have made, and if I would have made more money, then you would have stayed home.
And that's what I was just kind of going towards, where in today's society, sometimes a wife makes more than husband, to where he has to stay home, or it's more feasible, in this situation for him to become house dad or home dad, or stay at home to be the primary child care provider, and guys are doing it in record numbers now,
and doing a very good job at it, because I am blessed. My husband can cook, he can clean, he can wash much better than me. He can do everything that I could do for Aaron, he could do for Aaron. And so that's a blessing. So I think a part of the reason why there was not a lot of conflict in this area of roles and responsibilities, because we both have servants' hearts and we both are hard workers. And so I felt like anything that Gil would do, I was willing to do it as well. And I think that he would say the same thing. Anything because he would always say, I can comb her hair,
It may not look as good, but, I can do that one ponytail.
Yeah, and you always said that braids were like jump rope. It's like just twisting. And so a part of it is that you have to approach it. And I of course, I have a scripture. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, but he says to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. That to me is so powerful, because I think a lot of times we forget about grace. We always talk about love, we always talk about truth. But when I think of the word grace, I think of it, what I think of grace as the stronger person lending their power to the weaker person. And so if you approach your relationships with seeing it through grace, not that you're better or you're smarter than them, it's not less than, greater than. It's that who's the stronger in any area? Who's the weaker in any area? Because a facet of your personality and your character is going to have strengths and weaknesses. And so when we can begin to see our weaknesses as a good thing, and realize, well, you know what, you got me. So I may not be good at that, but guess what? You are. But again, it goes back to being honest.
Right. And you have to be mindful that we said it in the previous episode, the catchphrase, pay attention to the tension. So if you find that there's tension that is kind of bubbling up in the relationship when certain situations come up, you may want to park there for a little while and say, why do we always seem to be in conflict when this particular topic, situation, circumstance arises, to where maybe you haven't talked about whose responsibility or is there a decision that needs to be made that you need to communicate and talk about? Because 9 times out of 10, if there is a tension point there, that may be an indicator that you need to say, hey, let's talk about it. Let's sit there. Let's come to a mutually agreed upon decision about what's best in this situation or circumstance that's going to benefit us all as a family, and that's very, very vital and important, because you can just start looking at that thing that comes up and it can become a point of contention against your spouse or the person that you're in a relationship with.
Where you make it personal rather than you realize it's just, when you have more than one person in a relationship, there's going to be tension. There's going to be conflicts. But it's a matter of knowing that when you think of it from the perspective of, I need to give this person grace. And grace doesn't mean you're giving them a pass. Grace means that you're saying, I'm stronger in this area, so you know what? I'm going to do this. And to me, when you're doing something with the mindset of grace, you're not doing it to hold it over their head. You're not doing it to tell other people about it. You're basically just like the exercise of people have to fall back, close your eyes and fall back.
Exercise of trust.
It's trust. And to me, that is the greatest, visual example of what grace is. It's that I trust you enough to fall back, and you're strong enough to catch me without me having to say a word. And to me, I think that that's what we have to think about in our relationship in regards to roles and responsibilities. and staying in our own lanes.
Man, this is a good topic to actually kind of dialogue about that we're doing. But at this point, we want to go into the Got Wisdom.
It's time.
Oh, I got to let you do your part. Go ahead.
It's time.
Got Wisdom, Got Question. That this is the point in our show that we like to just kind of give some feedback and say thank you to all our listeners and the feedback that we've been getting. And it's coming, y'all. It's coming from all over, as you'll see today in our questions, because we got one all the way from Virginia. But this is our Got Wisdom, Got Questions. And so what you got?
Well, I want to first say thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to all of our listeners. Thank you, God, for providing this awesome platform. Thank you for my husband, who works a full-time job and still makes time for us to do this show, because we love you all and we want to make sure that we're giving back and making sure that the things that we've learned will live on long after we're gone.
Well, like people say, when you are doing something that you enjoy, it's not work.
No.
You know, so even as we talk about it, even when it's funny where you can work a full time, and then when you come in, you may not want to jump into a studio and do a recorder show, but it's almost like it's an energizer. So it's an enjoyable time. So you Got Wisdom, Got Question. What you got?
Well, we have our Got Wisdom from Alabama, and her name is Tawana, and her last name is Smith, and she has been married for 30 years.
Wow.
We just want to shout out to all of you guys who've been married.
Anytime, any amount of time, but thank you, Tawana, for even listening to the show and just providing some feedback. Appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for your wisdom.
So share her wisdom.
Her wisdom is communication. Oh yeah, communication. It is the key. We have grown in our relationship in so many aspects by keeping God first, honest communication, and a lifelong friendship is important. She says that you must like your spouse, maybe more even than you love them.
Wow.
And I thought that was so beautiful. And so thank you, Tawana in Alabama,
and what
for
I thought,
sharing your wisdom.
And what, I'm sorry, not to mean to step over you, but what I thought was awesome in that context that she said was the friendship was really awesome, because even after you've been married a while, and to even think about friendship still being a factor or something that you think about, because you tend to see a friend different, you know, especially when you've been married for a little while. Sometimes that would be the thing that kind of fades out. You don't think about them as in the context of a friend because you've been with them so long. Right. So I think that's awesome that she said that. So thank you.
I always, because we always joke and say that we still like each other.
Yeah, I still call you my girlfriend.
Yeah, because people don't realize that you can love someone, and Gil always says, I understand you can love somebody and not like them. You can love someone and not like them. And so it is a gift when you get to like them.
Right.
And
and especially when they're your spouse. So that's awesome. So thank you, Tawana.
Thank you, Tawana.
And so the that's the Got Wisdom. And the question came from
Jordan Cox.
Hey, Jordy.
She's our DC. We love her.
And so from Virginia.
Yes. And Jordan had a few really good questions.
But what's the one that you picked out this time?
And so we're going to hear some other questions from her. But this question that she asked was, what do you do when when one person is ready to introduce their parents to the person they're dating and the other person is not? I thought that was
thought-provoking?
Very thought-provoking.
But what did you think about? I mean, why was it thought-provoking to you?
Well, first of all, in this generation, Jordan is a millennial. And for her to even see that as something that's important, that says a lot about her parents. And that, because courting should be a family affair. Because your family is going to see things that you won't see. And so that's why I think that whole idea of courting with your parents being a part of the process it's for your protection. Why is that not important to the other person? You know, it might not necessarily have anything to do with you, because I said in one of the other episodes, because you spoke so highly of your mom, I felt a little, intimidated or inferior to introduce my parents, you to my parents. And so I think you need to really have the conversation, right, and ask the person why they don't want to.
And that's all good dialogue, because if there's some hesitation there, that should be a yellow light. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just a point of
pay attention to the tension.
Yeah, and it may not be any tension there, but it's just one of those things of there's a hesitation there. Is why is it an issue? And you can never go wrong with asking why. Why for understanding is always acceptable. When you question why, when you're challenging and all those things, that's where it can kind of run a little bit.
Yeah, but if you're just trying to understand.
Right, you're just trying to understand the other person's point of view. It could be a bad experience with their own family, or they just the parental thing just don't click with them or whatever. But those are the types of things that you want to know, because if you're at that stage where you're talking about meeting parents, that usually is probably indicating that the relationship is continuing on and progressing down the road to becoming something more lasting and
to one of the people.
Yeah.
And it might not be
the same.
Both. You may not both have the same idea of where the stage in the relationship is.
Right. And so we're answering these questions based on our own perspective, but I think that's still, I appreciate Jordan for even just sending the question in, because that tells you that you're thinking about relationships, and you can never be too young to think about, I think, what would be considered serious topics and serious issues in a relationship, because it is preparation for marriage.
It is.
That's what it's all about,
Being equipped.
So we appreciate everybody with the Got Wisdom, Got Questions. And as usual, if you do want to send in Got Wisdom, Got Questions, you can always reach us on the website, richrelationshipsus.com, or send it in via Gmail, which is richrelationship.us@gmail.com. So thank you guys again. Got Wisdom, Got Questions.
Okay, so we're going to talk about two different bins. We are going to talk about the thinker, and we're going to talk about the doer. And so I'm going to give you some pros and some cons. Some of the pros to the thinker is that a thinker is a person who is very, very smart. They're normally very blunt. They're very curious. They have great ideas, and they're really, really pay attention to detail. Mm-hmm. That's some of the characteristics of a thinker. Some of the downsides to the thinker
cons.
Mm-hmm. Or the cons would be that they are not risk takers, that they sometimes have great ideas that could really make a difference in their careers, but because they think so much about it, it stops them from moving, mm-hmm. from execution. And they don't realize that, thinkers pay so much attention to details that sometimes they lose focus of the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the pros to the cons to the thinker. And then you have the doer. The doer is the person that's brave, they're persistent, they're hardworking, and they're generally happier than the thinker.
Mm-hmm. But the cons
is that if you ask a doer to jump off of a cliff with a friend, more than likely the doer is going to take action, and they're going to do that. Not thinking about the consequences, not thinking about the pain, not thinking about the effects of their quick reaction. So that's some of the cons of the thinker. And so when you think about who are you, and of course you can't describe a human being in just
two categories.
But it's just a matter of you combine those two together, mm-hmm. the thinker and the doer together, and they can create something beautiful. And so I think a part of it is not trying to be what you are not, but finding out what you are, and then finding that person that you can spend your life with, building things that are beautiful together. And so I thought that we should be both thinkers and doers. Mm-hmm. That's the goal. It's not to be one or the other, but to grow towards being a thinker and a doer. Because the Bible says faith without works is dead. So we at some point have to take what we say we believe and do something with it. And so that's just something to think about, just food for thought, something to better become aware of who you are and who you're not.
And even as you were reading off those things, and that's kind of where you would go into the inventory, like, is that me? And sometimes it may not be all just you in this one. People are unique, situations are not, we say a lot, but that means you can have multiple things. You can have certain characteristics of one and not be just totally just that one. So you don't necessarily have to fit into one profile. You may have some of the characteristics of
the things that we've accomplished. Is because we're not the same.
Right.
Because if we were both thinkers, or we were both dreamers, then that would be very, very
challenging. You're going to have some deficiencies there.
You have the same weaknesses.
Sure.
You have the same strengths. And so I think the beauty of it's not so much opposites attract, it's just knowing the way you're bent and beginning to develop that and to not try to be like the other person.
Right.
You know, it's to be you. Yes, some of the things in your relationship, you're going to adopt your spouse's, some of their characteristics, but you still want to always be true to the way you're wired, because the other person needs you to be you.
Right.
And you need them to be them, because together you can accomplish something great. Because I think about just even using this podcast, you know, we used to laugh for the salon. We'd say we were Beauty and the Geek, because you're IT and I was in the beauty industry. Well, we still have the creative and the technical. And so I think about all of your graphs and all of your outlines and, you know, the equipment. We couldn't do this podcast without you.
And the part that I think is important, even as we talk about the show and everything, was it's important that we try to not just bring the typical things. These are real conversations that we have and that we talk about and that we've just noticed over time, either with other couples or that topics that come up. And just like this topic about roles and responsibility and decision making, there's tons and tons of great material out there about marriage and relationships and those types of things. But sometimes there are topics that need to be covered that are maybe not dove into or kind of smoothed over or surfaced, or even just neglected altogether, because it's so many complex parts to a relationships that I don't think there's any one book or one podcast or one show that could cover it all. You try to.
The Bible does.
You're correct in that aspect. But this is one of those times where that's what we try to do with this show.
Make it applicable.
Right. Not just talk about a subject, but just give you some real life applications and things to even think about to say, okay, I'm aware of this now. How do we make decisions, or how do we deal with our responsibilities and our roles in our relationships? You know,
and are we? Because one of the things that I is important to me is that we show that the Bible is still very powerful and relevant, but it's also applicable. Because I think about even when we first got saved, our whole thing was, how do you make the Bible applicable? We want, you know, Gil's really big on memorizing scripture. And I remember his whole thing was, we need to know where things are in the Bible. We need to know where you believe something, well, where is that at? And so that's always been our heart, is for the Bible not just to be a book that's on the shelf in the closet somewhere, but that you can see how every facet of it lines up with life, but taking it and how do you walk it out?
Right.
You know, so I've always thought about grace as being just a biblical term, but really, grace is a relationship term. And
a good point that you talk about with it as it pertains to the show today that we're talking about decisions, roles, responsibilities, and staying in your lane. There are going to be times in tension and points that come up that may be a point of tension about responsibilities or a decision that needs to be made, that if you have to, you may have to exercise some grace to that person you're in relationship with in order for it to be for a positive outcome to be produced.
Right.
You know, and that grace is basically giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're not there to win over or get over or accomplish or be the victor in that particular decision, or get their way if it's a decision that needs to be made, or assume a responsibility maybe they're just not capable of as well as you may be, and that they just try to take it, so to speak. And so those are all the topics that you need to discuss and talk about. And as we always say on the show, when it comes to those relationships, personal assessment and really looking inward is the longest journey that you're ever going to take.
And a part of being the best version of yourself with someone else is to be the best version of yourself by yourself. Because, you know, there are single people who are listening to this show. And yes, I have been married for a long time, but I've also maintained my own identity.
Right.
And I think that so many times we think that we're just going to get married and everything is going to just be wonderful. If you think that, you're sadly mistaken, because you're marrying another person, and that person has a past and a childhood. And so a part of understanding how to make this work is to be honest with who you are. And to be honest with who you are not. Because there's some things that you are so good at and that I may never be good at it.
And there are things that I definitely am not good at and struggle with that you're excellent with.
And I think that what makes our relationship really work is that, the Bible says whatever things are good and pure and lovely and of good report. I don't sit and focus on your shortcomings.
And yeah. That's
I don't focus on that. If you do that, I think that's why people end up single for so long, because they're only focusing on what the person is doing wrong, and they're not focusing on what they bring to the relationship.
Because even in the time of defining the roles and the responsibilities and decisions, those things are going to be worked out over time.
Yes.
It's
a process and a journey.
It's a process, a journey, but you're actually going to have to come to points of compromise. You're going to have to come to points of agreement, and sometimes even agree to disagree in situations and circumstances where you have to. That's just a natural part of relationships and working them out.
And being humble enough. I think about going back to the first story you're talking about. We're talking about, trying to decide on the colors of the paint and trying to decide on the name, is to be able to say, you know what, babe, I didn't know how you were going to do that, but that turned out really. Being able to be humble enough to go back and say, I was wrong, or thank you, what you brought. So a part of it is that, and we talked about it before, uniqueness in relationships. What the other person has, you need it. Don't dismiss it. Don't pick it apart. Embrace it and look at what you can accomplish together versus wanting everything to be the way you want it to be.
Right. And those are all things that we have to be conscious of and mindful of as we walk down this road in relationships. And we could keep talking and keep going.
Yes.
But we kind of come to the end of the show, but we actually always talk about the things that we talked about in the show. So if you're just not necessarily jumping in, but if you're coming up to the end part, you can actually look back and think about some of the things that we talked about in the show. We talked about the big takeaway that I took away from this, that men and women are just different. But we have to understand in that differences, there can be benefits too, where in my relationship with you, if I give you the freedom in the room to do what you do and not feel like I'm in competition with you or that we're competing against each other, that we both going to benefit. We both are going to benefit. And that's the end goal in any relationship, is to be on a mutual ground of respect. Because
when you win,
we all win.
We all win.
Yeah, so that's a plus. So we appreciate you guys listening. Did you have a takeaway or anything you wanted to close out the show with?
I think to me the thing that what was important to me about this particular topic as far as roles and responsibility and staying in your lane is finding out who you are, perfecting your strengths and your gifts, but also being open to hearing about your weaknesses. Because a part of getting better and a part of staying on course is having all the information. And so it's not just about you, like we always say, working on your legs. When you go to the gym, you see these guys with these big arms and little bitty legs. You got to work on the part of your body that is the weaker part of it. And so I think that in roles and responsibilities and really staying in your lane is about you really understanding who you are not, and then being open to praising the other person for their strengths, but praying for their weaknesses.
So always remember that we are stronger together.
Let's grow.
See you on the next episode. Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.